The sky over Chicago had been gray all day, but nobody expected the sudden downpour that hit the south side just after 5 p.m. Jasmine pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she rushed out of Big Lou's diner, the smell of fried onions and coffee still clinging to her uniform. 8 hours on her feet, and now she was late for her evening nursing class. "Girl, you better run if you want to catch that 47 bus," shouted Lou from behind the counter. Jasmine waved without looking back, pushing through the glass door into the rain. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she ran, her backpack bouncing against her spine with each step. Inside that backpack were her precious nursing textbooks, wrapped in plastic bags to keep them dry. Those books had cost her 2 months of tips. The digital clock on the bank building flashed 5:23 p.m. The bus would arrive at 5:25. She might just make it if the light at Wilson Avenue turned green quickly. But then she saw him. An old man stood at the corner, one hand clutching a worn-out plastic bag, the other reaching out to steady himself against a lamppost. The rain had soaked through his thin coat, and nobody stopped to help. People hurried past with their eyes down, some with umbrellas, some with hoods pulled up, all of them pretending not to notice. Jasmine slowed down. The crosswalk signal was counting down. 5, 4, 3. She glanced at the bus stop in the distance, then back at the old man who was now trying to step off the curb, his foot hesitating above a deep puddle. "Forget it," she muttered to herself and turned back. "Sir? Sir, can I help you across?" Jasmine called out, already opening her small folding umbrella to shield him. The old man looked up surprised. His face was weathered, with deep lines around his eyes. A scraggly grey beard covered his chin, and beneath his soaked cap, his eyes showed momentary confusion. I'm trying to get to the shelter on Mason Street," he said, his voice unexpectedly clear despite his appearance. "That's 3 blocks down. Here, take my umbrella and let me help you." Jasmine held out her arm. The old man hesitated. "You'll get wet." Jasmine smiled. "I'm already wet. Come on, the light's changing." As they crossed the street together, she noticed he walked with a slight limp. His clothes were clean but worn thin at the edges. The plastic bag he clutched contained what looked like a book and maybe some medication. "Why are you helping me?" he asked suddenly as they reached the other side. "Nobody else even looked my way." Jasmine shrugged. "My grandma raised me better than that, I guess. She always said what goes around comes around." Behind them, Jasmine heard the distinctive rumble of the 47 bus. She turned just in time to see it splash past, continuing down the street without her. "Oh no, that was my bus," she sighed. "Next one's not for 30 minutes. "I'm sorry," the old man said, genuine regret in his voice. "You missed it because of me." "It's okay. Professor Wilson will understand." She didn't mention that this would be her 3rd late arrival this month, or that Professor Wilson had already warned her about her attendance. They walked slower now, Jasmine still holding the umbrella over the old man more than herself. She told him about the nursing program, about how she worked double shifts at the diner to pay for school while helping her grandmother raise her younger brothers. "That's a heavy load for someone so young," the old man commented. "Life doesn't wait for you to be ready," Jasmine replied with a small smile. "You just gotta keep moving forward." When they reached the corner of Mason Street, the old man stopped. "I can make it from here," he said, trying to hand back the umbrella. "Keep it," Jasmine insisted. "I'm already soaked, and it looks like the rain's not stopping anytime soon." The old man studied her face for a long moment. "What's your name, young lady?" "Jasmine. Jasmine Taylor." "Thank you, Jasmine Taylor," he said, suddenly formal. "People like you are rare in this world." Jasmine waved away his thanks, already backing up toward the bus stop. Just the right thing to do. "Stay dry, sir." As she jogged away, she didn't notice the old man watching her go, or the sleek black car that had been idling half a block away, or the driver who stepped out to open the door for the homeless man who was now pulling a phone from his pocket. Jasmine was only thinking about what excuse she'd give Professor Wilson and whether the cafeteria would still be open when class ended at 9 p.m. "I compiled it during my nursing clinicals. Then the Foundation's research team verified and expanded it." Jasmine opened another folder. "And here are letters from 6 hospital administrators supporting our program because it would reduce their ER burden." The room grew silent as the board members began examining her documents. "You've been working on this for some time," the young board member said, sounding impressed. "Since before Mr. Montgomery ever spoke to me," Jasmine confirmed. "This isn't his pet project, it's mine. And it will work." Raymond's face had gone stiff. "Even if the concept has merit, we need someone experienced too." The boardroom door swung open, cutting him off. All heads turned to see Harold Montgomery's personal attorney, Lin Zhang, stride into the room. Her expression was coolly professional. "I apologize for interrupting," she said, "but I have a directive from Mr. Montgomery that affects these proceedings." Raymond stood up straighter. "Harold is in no condition to." "This directive was signed last month," Lin continued as if he hadn't spoken. "In the event of his temporary incapacitation, Harold specified that all projects under Ms. Taylor's supervision are to continue without interruption." She handed Raymond a document. "Her authority in these matters is to be considered equal to that of the acting director." As Raymond's face turned an interesting shade of purple, Jasmine fought to keep her expression neutral. But inside she was glowing. Harold had believed in her enough to protect her work, even when he couldn't be there himself. 5 years had passed since that rainy evening when Jasmine helped an old man cross the street. 5 years that had changed everything. The grand ballroom of the Chicago Lakefront Hotel buzzed with excitement. Reporters jostled for position near the stage. Business leaders and healthcare professionals mingled over champagne. A banner stretched across the back wall. "The Jasmine Taylor Initiative, bringing healthcare to every community." Behind the curtain, Jasmine smoothed down her dress for the 10th time. Her grandmother had insisted on buying it for the occasion, spending more than she ever had on a piece of clothing. "You're fidgeting again," said a familiar gravelly voice. Jasmine turned to find Harold watching her with amusement. At 83, he moved slower now, leaning on a polished wooden cane. The stroke had left its mark, with a slight droop to the left side of his face, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "I hate public speaking," Jasmine admitted. "Give me a patient with a medical emergency over a room full of strangers any day." Harold chuckled. "Funny thing to say right before announcing a billion-dollar healthcare initiative named after you. Still doesn't feel real." Jasmine peeked through the curtain at the crowd. 5 years ago, I was serving coffee and missing the bus. And helping strange old men in the rain," Harold added with a wink. A coordinator approached them. "2 minutes, Mr. Montgomery." Harold nodded and turned back to Jasmine, ready to make history. "As I'll ever be." Together they walked onto the stage, Harold moving carefully with his cane while Jasmine matched her pace to his. The applause was deafening. Harold approached the podium first. Camera flashes lit up the room as he adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. Some of you have known me for decades. Some only know me as the old rich guy who started that tech company." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. "But none of you would be here today if a young woman hadn't shown kindness to a stranger 5 years ago." Harold gestured to Jasmine, and the crowd applauded again. "I spent 2 weeks on the streets of Chicago, pretending to be homeless. I wanted to see who people really were when they didn't know who I was. The answer, mostly, was disappointing." He paused. "Except for Jasmine Taylor." From her seat, Jasmine could see her family in the front row. Nana dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Her brothers, now teenagers, looking uncomfortable in their suits but proud. Trina from the diner grinning so wide it must have hurt her face. "Jasmine didn't just help me cross a street," Harold continued. "She showed me the kind of impact one person can have. And she inspired me to think bigger about my own legacy." He went on to explain how Jasmine's mobile clinic idea had grown into a nationwide program that had served over 100,000 patients in its first year alone. "But that was just the beginning," Harold said, his voice growing stronger. "Today, I'm proud to announce the Jasmine Taylor Initiative, a billion-dollar commitment to revolutionize healthcare access in underserved communities across America." The room erupted in applause again. Harold waited for it to quiet down before continuing. "This initiative will fund mobile clinics, community health centers, medical scholarships, and preventive care programs in the neighborhoods that need them most. And the person who will lead this effort, who has earned the right to lead it, is the same person who inspired it." He turned to Jasmine. Would you come up here, please? As Jasmine took her place at the podium, her hands no longer trembled. 5 years of fighting for her ideas, of proving herself again and again, had built a confidence she never knew she had. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. And thank you all for being here today. She took a deep breath. I grew up in a community where getting sick was something you couldn't afford, where preventive care was a luxury, not a right, where hard-working people had to choose between seeing a doctor and paying their rent. She spoke about her mother, who had ignored symptoms until it was too late because she couldn't afford to take time off work. About neighbors who rationed medication or skipped it altogether. About how a simple doctor's visit could have prevented countless emergency room visits. Healthcare isn't just about medicine, Jasmine said. It's about dignity. It's about saying every life has value, regardless of zip code or income. As she outlined the details of the initiative, Harold watched from his seat with undisguised pride. When Raymond Parker had left the foundation 2 years ago, after a particularly heated disagreement about funding priorities, Harold had immediately promoted Jasmine to the executive team. Now, as she prepared to announce her newest role, Harold felt a deep satisfaction. His money had opened doors, but Jasmine had walked through them on her own merit. Before I finish, Jasmine said, I have one more announcement. As many of you know, Mr. Montgomery has been talking about retirement for some time. She smiled at him, though no one actually believes he'll ever fully retire. More laughter from the crowd. Today, the Montgomery Foundation Board of Directors has unanimously approved my appointment as the next Chief Executive Officer, effective next month. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Harold rose to his feet, leading the standing ovation. Later, as photographers captured images of Jasmine and Harold shaking hands in front of the banner, a reporter called out, Ms. Taylor, do you have any advice for young people trying to succeed? Jasmine thought for a moment. Be kind, she said simply. Not because of what you might get from it, but because of who it makes you. I didn't help Mr. Montgomery that day because I thought he was a billionaire in disguise. I helped because it was the right thing to do. She glanced at the old man beside her, who had changed her life as much as she had changed his. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, she added. It's measured in the lives you touch. Harold squeezed her hand. Couldn't have said it better myself. 3 days had passed since the rainy evening when Jasmine helped the old man cross the street. Life had returned to its normal rhythm. Wake up at 5 a.m., help get her brothers ready for school, attend morning classes, then rush to Big Lou's diner for the lunch and dinner shifts. Thursday afternoons were usually slow at the diner. Jasmine wiped down the counter for the 3rd time in an hour, watching the hands of the clock crawl toward 3 p.m. Only 4 tables were occupied, a couple of regulars nursing coffees, a mom with 2 kids sharing a plate of fries, and Mr. Ortiz, who came in every Thursday for the meatloaf special. Order up, Lou called from the kitchen window, sliding a plate of his famous apple pie across the stainless steel counter. Jasmine grabbed the pie and headed to table 7. Here you go, Mr. Ortiz. Extra cinnamon, just how you like it. The bell above the door jingled, and Jasmine turned to greet the new customer with her standard, Welcome to Big Lou's, sit anywhere you'd like. The words caught in her throat. A tall, elderly man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stood in the doorway. His silver hair was neatly combed, his face cleanly shaved. But Jasmine recognized those eyes, the same ones that had looked up at her with surprise when she offered her umbrella 3 days ago. It was the old man from the street corner. Except he didn't look homeless anymore, not even close. Behind him, through the window, Jasmine could see a sleek black car parked outside, the kind that cost more than she'd make in 5 years at the diner. Good afternoon, the man said, his voice exactly as she remembered it. I was hoping you might be working today. Trina, the other waitress on duty, stepped forward. Sir, would you like a table? I would, thank you. In Miss Taylor's section, if possible. Trina shot Jasmine a curious look before leading the man to a booth by the window. Jasmine took a deep breath, grabbed a menu, and followed. How do you know my last name? She asked quietly as she placed the menu in front of him. She hadn't told him her last name during their brief encounter. The man smiled. I make it my business to know things. It's part of how I've survived this long. What can I get you? Jasmine kept her voice professional despite her confusion. Just coffee, black, and perhaps a few minutes of your time when you're not busy. Jasmine glanced around the nearly empty diner. I can take my break now if that works. When she returned with his coffee, she slid into the seat across from him, trying not to show how uncomfortable she felt. I want to thank you properly for your kindness the other day, the man said, taking a sip of his coffee. It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done the same. The man set down his cup. That's where you're wrong, Jasmine. I spent 2 weeks on those streets. 2 weeks where people pretended not to see me, where they crossed to the other side of the road, where they told me to get a job or worse. He leaned forward. You were the only one who stopped. The only one who treated me like a human being. Jasmine didn't know what to say to that. So, you're not actually homeless. The man shook his head. No, I'm Harold Montgomery. The name meant nothing to Jasmine, and it must have shown on her face. Harold smiled. I founded Montgomery Technologies in 1982. We make the chipsets in most modern smartphones. Jasmine's eyes widened. Even she had heard of Montgomery Technologies. There was a huge Montgomery building downtown that her bus passed every day. Why were you pretending to be homeless? Harold stayed out the window for a moment. When you have money, a lot of money, you start to wonder what's real. Who would help you if you had nothing? Who sees the person, not the wallet? He turned back to her. I do it every few years. A reality check, you might say. As Harold spoke, Lou peeked out from the kitchen, clearly wondering why Jasmine was sitting with a customer. She gave him a small wave to signal everything was okay. I want to repay your kindness, Harold said, reaching into his jacket pocket. That's really not necessary. Please, he said, placing a small envelope on the table. This is my card. There's also an invitation to meet me at my office this weekend. I have a proposition for you. Jasmine didn't touch the envelope. What kind of proposition? One that could change your life, Harold said simply. But only if you want it to change. He finished his coffee and stood up, leaving a $100 bill on the table. The coffee was excellent. Keep the change. Before Jasmine could protest or ask any more questions, Harold Montgomery walked out, nodding politely to Lou as he passed. Through the window, Jasmine watched as a driver held open the door to the black car. The envelope sat untouched on the table, like something from another world that had accidentally fallen into hers. Who was that? Trina whispered, suddenly appearing at Jasmine's side. Jasmine picked up the envelope, feeling the thick, expensive paper between her fingers. I'm not entirely sure, she answered honestly. Jasmine stood outside the Montgomery building, clutching the invitation card in her hand. The glass and steel tower seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. People in business suits brushed past her, barely noticing the young woman in her best pair of jeans and the only blazer she owned, bought second-hand for job interviews. This is crazy, she whispered to herself. For the 5th time that morning, she considered turning around and heading back to the bus stop. She had nearly talked herself out of coming at all, but her grandmother's words kept echoing in her head. When opportunity knocks, you better answer the door, child. With a deep breath, Jasmine pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that sparkled with marble floors and modern art. A security guard at the front desk looked her up and down. Can I help you? Jasmine handed over the invitation with slightly trembling fingers. I'm here to see Mr. Montgomery. The guard's eyebrows shot up as he examined the card. He made a quick phone call, then handed Jasmine a visitor's badge. Express elevator. Top floor. The elevator moved so fast that Jasmine's ears popped. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a space that looked more like a luxury apartment than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Chicago, making the city where she'd lived her entire life suddenly look like a miniature model. Jasmine, you came. Harold Montgomery walked toward her, dressed more casually than at the diner, but still in clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Water is fine, Jasmine said, her mouth suddenly dry. Nice place you have here. Harold laughed. It's a bit much, I know. Please, sit down. They settled into leather chairs. Say you'll think about it, Harold replied. That's all I ask for now. As Jasmine rode the elevator back down to the lobby, her mind was spinning. The proposition seemed too good to be true. and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Yet something about the old man's eyes told her he was sincere. The question was, could she trust it? Could she trust him? You told him no. Girl, have you lost your mind? Trina's voice carried across the diner, causing several customers to look up from their meals. Jasmine continued wiping down the counter. Keep your voice down. And yes, I told him no. It had been a week since her meeting with Harold Montgomery. A week of turning his offer over and over in her mind before finally sending a polite but firm email declining his help. But why? Trina lowered her voice to a whisper as she leaned across the counter. He was gonna pay for everything. That's like winning the lottery. Jasmine shrugged. Nothing comes for free, Trina. Not in this world. Order up. Lou called from the kitchen. Jasmine grabbed the plates and headed to table 5, grateful for the interruption. She wasn't sure she could explain her decision to anyone else when she barely understood it herself. Something about being handed a future she hadn't earned just didn't sit right with her. Later that night, Jasmine trudged up the stairs to the second-floor apartment she shared with her grandmother and 2 younger brothers. Her feet ached from the double shift, and she still had 3 chapters to read before her exam tomorrow. That you, baby girl? Her grandmother's voice called from the living room as Jasmine unlocked the door. Yeah, Nana, it's me. Jasmine found her grandmother sitting in her recliner, a pile of bills spread across her lap. Even in the dim light, Jasmine could see the worry lines etched deep into her face. You're home late, Nana said, quickly gathering the papers and stuffing them back into their envelopes. Covered for Trina. She had a doctor's appointment. Jasmine set down her backpack and collapsed onto the couch. The boys asleep. Nana nodded. Fed them, helped with homework, tucked them in. She hesitated. Baby, we need to talk about something. The seriousness in her grandmother's voice made Jasmine sit up straighter. What's wrong? Nana pulled an envelope from the stack. Got this from Dr. Williams today. My blood pressure is too high. He wants me to start on new medication. Okay, Jasmine said slowly. That's not so bad, right? We can handle another prescription. It's expensive, insurance won't cover much of it. Jasmine's stomach tightened. How expensive? $200 a month. The number hung in the air between them. $200 they didn't have. I'll pick up more shifts, Jasmine said automatically. Her grandmother shook her head. You're already working yourself to the bone, and your grades have been slipping. Mrs. Johnson from next door saw your professor's email on the computer screen when you left it open. Nana, you were snooping. I was worried. Her grandmother's eyes filled with tears. You're killing yourself trying to take care of us all. Something's got to give. Jasmine looked away, Montgomery's offer suddenly echoing in her mind. All that money, all that help, just waiting for her to say yes. We'll figure it out, she said, patting her grandmother's hand. We always do. But that night, as Jasmine tried to focus on her textbook, her eyes kept drifting closed. The words blurred on the page. Her phone chimed with a text from her study group. Where were you tonight? We missed you at the library session. Another missed study group, her 3rd this month. The next morning, Jasmine woke up to find her brother Dion sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an empty cereal box. Sorry, buddy. I forgot to buy more, she said, rubbing her eyes. She'd fallen asleep on her textbook again. It's okay. His small voice tried to sound brave. I'm not that hungry anyway. The lie broke something inside her. Jasmine pulled out her phone and looked up the email she'd saved but never deleted. The reply came within an hour. I'm glad you reconsidered, Harold's message read. My offer stands with one change. You mentioned wanting to earn your way. I respect that. So here's my revised proposition. A part-time position at my foundation while you complete your studies. The job pays enough to cover your expenses and includes full medical benefits for you and your family. Is that something you could accept? Jasmine stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about her grandmother's medication, her brother's empty cereal bowls, and her own exhaustion. Sometimes pride had to take a backseat to practicality. When can I start? She typed back. Jasmine adjusted her name badge in the elevator mirror. After 6 months at the Montgomery Foundation, she still couldn't quite believe this was her life now. The doors opened to the 47th floor, and she stepped out onto the now familiar marble tiles. Care workers nodded and smiled as she passed. Some genuine, some not so much. "Morning, Jasmine," called Denise from the front desk. "Mr. Montgomery wants to see you when you get in, said it's important." Jasmine's stomach fluttered. Despite their weekly meetings, being summoned to Harold's office still made her nervous. She dropped her bag at her desk and headed to the corner office with its sprawling view of the Chicago skyline. Harold was on the phone when she knocked, but he waved her in with a smile. At 78, his energy put people half his age to shame. Today, he wore a navy suit that probably cost more than a semester of Jasmine's old tuition. "That's exactly what I told them," he said into the phone. "The healthcare initiative launches next month, not when they decide they're ready. Yes, well, that's why I brought in someone who actually understands what these communities need." He winked at Jasmine, and she fought back a smile. That someone was her. Harold hung up and sighed. Board members. They'd want the glory of charity work without doing the actual work. He gestured to the chair across from him. "How are classes going?" "Final semester's kicking my butt, but I'm hanging in there." Jasmine had learned early on that Harold preferred honesty to sugarcoating. "And your grandmother?" "The new medication working. Blood pressure's down to normal range. The boys love having her back to her old self." Harold nodded, genuinely pleased. "The real reason I wanted to see you was this." He pushed a folder across the desk. "Your idea about mobile health clinics for underserved neighborhoods. I had our team run the numbers." Jasmine's heart raced as she opened the folder. The idea had come to her after seeing how many people in her old neighborhood avoided doctors until they were desperately ill, not just because of money, but because the nearest decent clinic was an hour-long bus ride away. "They think it'll work?" she asked, scanning the report. "Better than work. They think it could revolutionize urban healthcare access." Harold leaned forward. "I want you to lead the pilot program." Jasmine's head snapped up. "Me? But I'm just an assistant, and I haven't even finished nursing school." "You'll graduate in 2 months. And you've shown more insight into community healthcare than consultants I've paid millions." Harold's eyes held hers. "You understand these people because you are these people, Jasmine. You know what they need because you've lived it." Before Jasmine could respond, the door opened and Raymond Parker, the Foundation's executive director, walked in without knocking. "Harold, we need to discuss the budget for." He stopped short when he saw Jasmine. "I didn't realize you were busy with staff." The way he said staff made it clear what he thought of Jasmine's position. "Perfect timing, Raymond," Harold said cheerfully, ignoring the man's tone. "I was just telling Jasmine she'll be heading our new mobile clinic initiative." Raymond's polished smile froze. "That's an interesting choice. Perhaps someone with more experience might be better suited." "Thomas in healthcare policy has 20 years off." "Thomas has 20 years of looking at spreadsheets," Harold interrupted. "When was the last time he set foot in the South Side?" "With all due respect, we're running a major foundation, not a community center." Raymond's voice remained smooth, but his eyes were cold when they flicked to Jasmine. "Some decisions require a certain professional background." Jasmine had heard enough. 6 months ago, she might have shrunk under his gaze. Not anymore. "My professional background includes working 3 jobs while studying nursing and raising my brothers after my mom died," she said, keeping her voice level. "I've held people's hands in waiting rooms because they couldn't afford both medicine and bus fare home. I've watched neighbors avoid checkups until their treatable conditions became emergencies." She stood up, meeting Raymond's height. "So yes, my background is different from yours. That's exactly why this program will work." The room fell silent. Raymond looked to Harold, clearly expecting him to put Jasmine in her place. Instead, Harold grinned. "That's precisely why I hired her, Raymond. Anything else you needed?" After Raymond left, Harold chuckled. "You know he's been trying to get his nephew on staff for months. Keeps saying we need fresh blood from the right schools." "I'm sorry if I spoke out of turn," Jasmine said, that she wasn't sorry at all. "Never apologize for standing your ground," Harold said. "This foundation needs more people who've lived in the real world and fewer who've only read about it." He tapped the folder. "So, the mobile clinics, you in?" Jasmine looked down at the report, then back at Harold. In 6 months, she'd gone from serving coffee to helping design healthcare programs. I'm in. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Trina. Turn on Channel 7 now. She grabbed the remote and flipped to the news, where a reporter stood outside the Montgomery Foundation's headquarters. Sources say that 78-year-old billionaire Harold Montgomery suffered a stroke last night and has been hospitalized. Montgomery Technology stock has already dropped 8% as investors react to the news. Jasmine's heart sank. She'd just spoken with Harold yesterday about expanding the mobile clinic program. He'd seemed fine, tired maybe, but as sharp as ever. She dialed his assistant, but the call went straight to voicemail. Next, she tried the foundation's main line. Montgomery Foundation, how may I direct your call? The receptionist's voice was tight with stress. This is Jasmine Taylor. I need information about Mr. Montgomery's condition. I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor, but only family and senior executives are receiving updates at this time. The line went dead before Jasmine could respond. She stared at her phone in disbelief. After nearly a year working directly with Harold, she wasn't considered important enough to know if he was even alive. When she arrived at the office that morning, the atmosphere was tense. Small groups huddled in corners, whispering. Jasmine spotted Denise from the front desk and hurried over. What's happening? Is he okay? Denise glanced around before leaning close. He's stable, but it was serious. The families gathered at the hospital. She lowered her voice further. Raymond's called an emergency board meeting for noon. The knot in Jasmine's stomach tightened. Raymond Parker had never hidden his disdain for what he called Harold's pet projects, which included both Jasmine and her mobile clinic initiative. At 11:30, an email arrived in Jasmine's inbox. The subject line read, Project Review, Urgent. The message was brief. All projects initiated in the past 6 months are suspended pending review. Report to Conference Room B at 2 p.m. to discuss the Mobile Healthcare Initiative. Raymond Parker, Acting Director. Jasmine printed out every document related to her program. Budgets, impact assessments, community surveys, everything. If Raymond wanted a fight, she'd come armed with facts. When she entered Conference Room B, she found not just Raymond but 5 board members seated around the table. Their expressions ranged from bored to hostile. Ms. Taylor, Raymond said with a thin smile, thank you for joining us. In light of Mr. Montgomery's unfortunate condition, we're reevaluating certain funding priorities. A white-haired woman Jasmine recognized as the board treasurer spoke up. The mobile clinic program represents a significant investment with uncertain returns. We're concerned about committing resources to an unproven concept led by someone with limited experience. Jasmine took a deep breath. With all due respect, I'd like to present the data supporting this initiative. We've reviewed the materials, Raymond cut in. The board feels the foundation's resources would be better allocated to established programs with proven outcomes. One of the younger board members, a man with wire-rimmed glasses, frowned. I thought Harold was quite enthusiastic about this project. Harold has many enthusiasms, Raymond replied. Our duty is to ensure the Foundation's resources are managed responsibly, not indulging his charitable impulses. The way he said it made charitable sound like a dirty word. Jasmine's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. Mr. Montgomery approved this program because it addresses a critical gap in healthcare delivery to underserved communities. We've documented how lack of transportation prevents thousands of people from accessing basic preventive care. Very moving, Raymond said dismissively. But sentiment doesn't justify a $3 million expenditure. Jasmine looked him directly in the eye. It's not sentiment, it's economics. She pulled a folder from her stack and slid it across the table. This contains an analysis of emergency room visits from 3 South Side neighborhoods. Over 60% are for conditions that could have been prevented or treated earlier at much lower cost. Where did you get this data? The treasurer asked, clearly surprised.